Wyatt Carter pressed his father's deed against his chest like it was the only thing keeping his heart from giving out. And then he slid it across the banker's desk. He didn't fight, didn't beg. That was the morning he accepted the Rocking K Ranch was finished. But 3 days later, a woman stepped off the stagecoach with one carpet bag and a look in her eyes that made him feel ashamed of quitting. And everything started to shift. Subscribe to this channel. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to know how far this story travels. Now let's begin. Wyatt Carter's hand was shaking when he picked up the pen. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, hadn't slept more than 2 hours in 3 nights. He was sitting across from Gerald Holt inside the Ridgeline Savings and Trust, and the paper spread on the desk between them said one thing with cold, printed clarity. Sign here, and the Rocking K Ranch belongs to the bank. Take your time, Wyatt, Gerald said. The way he said it, slow, already satisfied, made Wyatt's jaw clench until his back teeth ached. Don't need time. Wyatt set the pen down flat. I need 6 months. Gerald leaned back in his chair. He was a thick man, gray at the temples, with soft hands that had never once pulled a fence post or dragged a calf out of the mud. He smiled, the way a man smiles when he already knows how the cards are going to fall. We've had this conversation, Gerald said. We've had it, and I'm having it again. Wyatt pushed the paper back across the desk. The orchard's coming in. East pasture's almost ready for cattle. Give me 6 months to prove the numbers. The numbers are already proven, Gerald tapped the ledger beside his elbow. Proven against you. My father built that ranch with his bare hands. The words came out quieter than Wyatt meant them to. Quieter and harder. He never took a dollar from this bank he didn't pay back double. You know that better than anybody. I knew your father, Gerald said. I'm sitting here with you. Wyatt looked at him for a long moment. Outside, he could hear the main street of Ridgeline going about its morning. Horses, voices, the distant ring of the smithy. The whole town just turning like a wheel, while he sat in here watching 11 years of his life get folded into a bank ledger. He picked the pen back up. His fingers closed around it. He thought about his father's hands, about the way Thomas Carter used to walk the fence line at first light, touching the posts one by one like he was greeting old friends, about the smell of the orchard in bloom every April, and how his father used to say, "Boy, long as those trees are standing, we're standing." Wyatt set the pen down again, hard. I'm not signing today. Gerald's smile went flat. Wyatt, I said I'm not signing today. He stood up, pushed the chair back, and picked his hat off the desk. You'll get your money, or you'll get your fight. Either way, you ain't getting my signature today. He walked out before Gerald could answer. The sun hit him like a fist the moment he pushed through the door. He stood on the boardwalk, hat in hand, and stared down the length of Ridgeline's main street without really seeing any of it. His breathing was unsteady. His chest felt like something was compressed inside it, something that had been pressed down so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe all the way through. He had maybe 3 weeks before Gerald Holt came back with a court order. 3 weeks, no cash, and enough debt on the Rocking K to bury a man twice over. He thought about the letter he'd sent 2 months ago, the one to the agency in St. Louis. He thought about how desperate a man had to be to send that kind of letter. His neighbor, Earl Briggs, fell into step beside him without being invited, the way Earl always did. Earl was a round, good-natured man who meant well and talked too much, and right now Wyatt didn't have the patience for either quality. Didn't sign? Earl asked. No. Good. 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 Earl nodded too many times. So what's the plan then? Working on it. Because people are talking, Wyatt. town saying Holt's already picked out who he's going to sell the east parcel to once he gets your deed. Talking about putting up some kind of Earl. Wyatt stopped walking. I know what they're saying. Earl went quiet for a beat. Then, carefully, there was also some talk about, well, about the letter you sent to that agency. Wyatt looked at him sideways. Word travels, Earl said, somewhat apologetically. Word travels because somebody reads other people's correspondence, Wyatt said. He looked at Earl directly. Earl had the decency to study the ground. Is it true? Earl asked. You really sent for a mail-order bride? Wyatt started walking again. Stage comes in tomorrow. Earl caught up in 3 quick steps. Wyatt, now I don't mean any offense, but people are already talking, Earl. Can't make it worse.
They're saying you've lost your mind. Saying a bride ain't gonna save a dying ranch. Saying whoever this woman is, she's either a fool or she's... Earl stopped himself. Or she's what? Or she's desperate, Earl said quietly. And desperate women from those agencies, they ain't always what a man is hoping for, Wyatt. Wyatt turned and looked at him then. Really looked at him. And Earl, to his credit, held the gaze. I don't need what I'm hoping for, Wyatt said. I need someone willing to work. Someone with sense enough to help me figure a way out of this before Holt takes everything my father left me. He put his hat back on. That's all I need. Nothing more. He left Earl standing on the boardwalk and walked to his horse. He didn't sleep that night either. He lay on the cot in the ranch house and listened to the silence, the particular silence of a place that used to have more people in it. His father's boots were still by the door. He hadn't moved them. Hadn't been able to. That was a thing he didn't examine too closely. He thought about what kind of woman answers an advertisement in a gazette and agrees to marry a stranger with a failing ranch in the Colorado Highlands. He thought about what kind of life she must be leaving behind to make that seem like a reasonable choice. He figured she was probably running from something. Most people who came west were. He reckoned that was all right. He wasn't exactly standing on solid ground himself. The stagecoach came in at 10:30 the next morning, and it seemed like the entire population of Ridgeline had somewhere to be right along Main Street at exactly that hour. Wyatt stood at the far end of the platform, hat in hand, watching the coach come in. He kept his face arranged into something neutral. He had a talent for that, a face that gave nothing away. His father had called it stubbornness. His mother, God rest her, had called it armor. The coach stopped. The driver climbed down. The door swung open. The first person out was a traveling salesman Wyatt didn't recognize. The second was an older woman with a large carpet bag and the expression of someone who'd been sitting next to the salesman for 6 hours. And then the third person stepped out, and something in Wyatt's chest shifted so abruptly he almost took a step backward. She was not what he'd pictured. He wasn't sure exactly what he had pictured, something weathered maybe, or hardened, or, at minimum, resigned. The kind of woman who'd look at the frontier and square her shoulders because she had no other choice. This woman stepped off that coach and looked around Ridgeline with the calm, assessing expression of someone taking inventory. She was slight, dark-haired, with a traveling dress that had once been expensive and now showed the careful repair of someone who took care of things because they had to, not because they could replace them. She had one carpet bag, one, and she carried it herself. She looked at the crowd first. Then she looked down the platform and found Wyatt, or rather, she found him the way a person finds a landmark they've already plotted on a map. Like she'd already thought through this moment and come to some conclusion about it.
She walked toward him with a straight back and steady eyes. Wyatt stood still. "Mr. Carter," she said, not a question. "Ma'am?" He put his hat back on, then immediately took it off again, which was not a thing he normally did.
"Wyatt Carter, yes. Isabelle Montgomery." She held out her hand, not delicately, but plainly, the way a person offers a hand in a business arrangement. "You can call me Izzy. Most people do." He shook it. Her grip was firm. "Izzy," he said, "you have a good trip?" "Long," she said. "Is the ranch far?" "About 4 miles north." She nodded, glanced down at her single bag, and then looked back at him. "I'm ready when you are." From somewhere along the platform, a woman's voice, sharp, carrying, designed to be overheard, said, "Lord, he really did send for one." And then another voice, "She ain't what I expected." And then a man's voice, low and amused, "Reckon she ain't what he expected either." Izzy didn't turn, didn't flinch. She just looked at Wyatt, and something in her expression said, quietly and with great patience, "I have heard worse. Are you going to be a problem, or are we going to get on with this?" Wyatt took her carpetbag out of her hand. "Wagons this way," he said. They didn't talk much on the ride out to the ranch. Wyatt drove, and Izzy sat beside him on the bench with her hands folded in her lap, watching the land go by with that same steady, cataloging attention she turned on Ridgeline. After a while, she said, "The orchard I saw from the road. Those your apple trees?" "Yes, ma'am." "How many acres?" He glanced at her. "About 12. Why?" "Just asking." She looked out at the passing land again. "The fruit was setting well. I could see it from the coach." Wyatt kept his eyes on the road. "You know something about orchards?" "I know something about a lot of things," she said. He waited for her to go on. She didn't. He wasn't sure if that was confidence or caution, and he wasn't sure it mattered yet. "I should tell you," he said after another stretch of silence, "that the ranch is in some difficulty." "I assumed that," she said, without judgment, without drama. Just, "I assumed that." "Gerald Holt at the bank has got a foreclosure notice he's been itching to file for 6 months. I owe money I can't presently pay back." He gripped the reins a little tighter. "I was straight in my advertisement about the circumstances." "You were," she agreed. "You said, 'Struggling ranch, hard work required, no guarantees.' Those were your words." "You remembered them exactly." "I remember most things exactly," she said. "It's a useful quality." He looked at her again, sideways. She was looking at the orchard as they passed it, and the expression on her face was one he couldn't quite read. Not romantic, not sentimental. More like someone running calculations behind their eyes. "What made you answer?" he asked. He hadn't planned to ask it, but it came out anyway. She was quiet for a moment. "What made you send the advertisement?" He almost smiled in spite of himself. "Fair enough." "I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours," she said. "But not today. Let's see the ranch first." The first thing Izzy did when they arrived at the Rocking K was walk the perimeter of the house without being asked to, moving at a measured pace, touching nothing, just looking. Wyatt stood by the wagon and watched her. He couldn't tell if it made him uneasy or if he was relieved that she wasn't weeping or demanding to be sent back. She came back to the front of the house and looked at him. "The barn roof needs attention on the south side," she said. "There's rot in the post on the left side of the porch that'll take the whole corner if you don't deal with it before winter. And the pump housing looks recent. Did you replace it this year?" Wyatt stared at her. "April," he said. "How did you—" "The wood's a different color from the rest." She looked around the yard again. "The house is solid, though. Your father built well."
The words landed on him unexpectedly. He turned away, fussed unnecessarily with the horse's bridle. "He did," he said, after a moment. She let the silence sit for a beat, which he appreciated. "Where do I sleep?" she asked. "Room at the top of the stairs. It was my mother's room. It's the best one in the house." She picked up her carpet bag. "Thank you. Izzy." The word came out before he decided to say it. She stopped, looked back at him. "I want you to know, I mean to do right by this arrangement. I don't know what kind of man you were expecting, but I keep my word. That's about the only thing I've got left that nobody can take from me." She studied him for a moment with those steady, calculating eyes. And then something in her expression changed. Something shifted behind it, careful and just barely visible, like light under a closed door. "I believe you," she said. She went inside. Wyatt stood in the yard alone and breathed for what felt like the first time in 3 days. He found her that evening at the kitchen table with his ledger open in front of her. His first impulse was anger, pure, reflexive, territorial. And he got as far as, "What in the—" before she looked up at him with a kind of calm that stopped a man mid-sentence, not because it was soft, but because it was utterly unafraid. "Sit down," she said. "That's my ledger." "I know. Sit down." He sat down. He didn't entirely know why. She turned the ledger around and slid it across the table to him. "You've got more here than you think," she said. "The debt to Holt is real, but the way it's structured, he's charging you compound interest on a note that should have been simple interest under your original agreement. Do you have the original papers from when your father took the loan?" Wyatt looked at the ledger. Then he looked at her. "How do you know anything about loan structures?" "Do you have the original papers?" "In the tin box on the shelf behind you." "What do you know about—" She was already on her feet, pulling down the tin box. She sat back down and opened it and began looking through the papers with the focused, unhurried efficiency of someone who had done this before. Many times before. "Where did you learn this?" Wyatt asked. He kept his voice even, though something was moving in his chest that he couldn't name. "My father was an accountant," she said, not looking up. "I worked at his office from the time I was 9 years old. I know numbers the way you know land." She found the paper she was looking for and smoothed it flat on the table. "Here, read this line." He leaned over, read it again. "Simple interest," he said slowly. "Simple interest," she confirmed. "Holt has been calculating compound since your father died and you took over the note, which means the amount he's claiming you owe is not the amount you actually owe." She looked up at him then, and her eyes were very direct and very clear. "It means you may have grounds to challenge the foreclosure, Wyatt." The sound of his own name in her voice. No Mr. Carter, just Wyatt, plain and straightforward, did something unexpected to him. He sat back in his chair, ran a hand across his jaw. "You knew this when you sat down with this ledger," he said. "I suspected it. Now I know it. You've been here less than a day." "Numbers don't change based on how long I've been looking at them," she said simply. Outside, a night bird called once and went quiet. The lamp on the table burned steady. Wyatt looked at this woman, this stranger he'd sent a letter to in desperation, this woman who'd stepped off a stagecoach with one bag and steady eyes, and he felt something shift inside him that he couldn't push back down the way he pushed everything else down. "Izzy," he said, "what are you running from?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then she closed the tin box gently, folded her hands on top of it, and said, "The same thing you are." He waited.
"The idea that we have already lost," she said. Wyatt Carter looked down at the original loan document on the table, at his father's signature at the bottom, careful and proud. And for the first time in longer than he could honestly remember, he did not feel entirely alone in this house. He felt something stranger and more dangerous than that. He felt like maybe it wasn't over yet. Wyatt didn't sleep that night either, but for a different reason than the nights before. He lay on his cot and stared at the ceiling and thought about compound interest. Thought about his father's signature at the bottom of that loan document, careful and proud. The way Thomas Carter did everything, like every mark he left on the world was meant to last. Thought about Gerald Holt sitting across that desk with his soft hands and his satisfied smile, running compound interest on a simple note for 2 years without saying a word about it. Thought about the woman upstairs who'd spotted it in under an hour. He was up before dawn. Izzy was already in the kitchen. She had the tin box open again, papers spread across the table in a pattern that looked like disorder but clearly wasn't, because she moved through them with the certainty of someone who knew exactly where everything was. She had a cup of coffee at her elbow and a pencil behind her ear, and she did not look like a woman who had traveled 600 miles yesterday and slept in a strange house for the first time. She looked like a woman who had been waiting for this table her entire life. "You're up early," Wyatt said. "I'm always up early." She didn't look up from the papers. "Coffee's on the stove." He poured a cup and sat down across from her. He watched her work for a moment. The way her eyes moved across figures. The small line that formed between her brows when she found something that didn't sit right. The way she tapped the pencil twice on the table when she was confirming something in her head. "How bad is it?" he asked. She looked up then, directly, the way she did everything. "It's fixable," she said. "That ain't what I asked." She set the pencil down. "Holt has been overcharging you for 22 months. The actual amount you owe under the original note is $412 less than what he's been claiming." She let that land, then continued. "Which means you are not as close to foreclosure as he wants you to believe. Which means he has been pressuring you toward a signature using numbers he knows are wrong." Wyatt's hand tightened around the coffee cup. "He's been lying." "He's been calculating incorrectly in a way that consistently benefits himself," she said. "Whether that's a lie or a strategy depends on how charitable you want to be. I don't feel particularly charitable toward Gerald Holt." "No," she said. "I don't imagine you do." He stood up. He couldn't sit still with that information sitting in his chest. It was the kind of thing that needed movement to process. He walked to the window, stood there for a moment, then turned back. "So what do we do with this?" "We go see him," she said. "Together. With the original document and a corrected ledger showing the actual balance." She picked up the pencil again. "But not today. I need one more day with these figures to make certain I haven't missed anything. If we walk into that bank and he finds a hole in our numbers, we lose the advantage. And if we wait too long, we're not waiting too long. We're waiting one day to be right instead of being fast." She looked at him steadily. "There's a difference, Wyatt." He recognized that tone. His father had used that exact tone. The one that said, "I understand you're anxious, but anxiety is not a plan." He sat back down. "One day," he said. "One day," she confirmed, and went back to the papers. The problem arrived before noon, in the form of Dale Pritchard, who was Gerald Holt's man in all the ways that mattered and none of the ways that were official. Dale was the kind of man a town produced when it didn't ask enough questions about who held power and why. Big, unhurried, wearing his authority like a coat he hadn't earned. He rode into the Rocking K yard without being invited, which was his habit. Wyatt came out of the barn and saw him,
and his first instinct was to look back toward the house, which told him something about himself he didn't examine too closely. "Carter," Dale said, still on horseback. "Mr. Holt wanted me to remind you that the extension on your payment is 2 weeks out." "I know what it is. Just making sure." Dale's eyes moved to the house, then back to Wyatt with an expression that was not quite a smile. "Word is you had somebody come in on the stage yesterday." "Word travels fast." "Small town." Dale shifted in the saddle. "A bride, they're saying." Wyatt said nothing. "Mr. Holt finds that interesting," Dale said. "A man who can't pay his mortgage, finding money to send off for a woman." "The agency don't charge for correspondence," Wyatt said flatly. "No, I reckon not." Dale looked at the house again. "She gonna be here long, you think?" And that was when the front door opened, and Izzy walked out. She came across the yard at a measured pace, no hurry in her step, and she stopped at Wyatt's shoulder and looked up at Dale Pritchard with an expression of polite, absolute calm. "Good morning," she said. Dale looked at her the way men like Dale looked at women they'd already decided were irrelevant. "Morning, miss." "Mrs. Carter," she said. Wyatt went very still. Dale blinked. "Beg pardon?" "Mrs. Carter," Izzy repeated pleasantly. "We married this morning. Small ceremony, just the two of us, which suits us fine." She glanced at Wyatt with the ease of someone reading from a script she'd written in advance. "Wyatt, did you get Mr. "Pritchard," Wyatt said, recovering. "Mr. Pritchard's name?" She smiled at Dale. "I didn't catch who you represent, Mr. Pritchard." Dale looked between them. Something in his expression shifted, recalculated. "Ridgeline, Savings, and Trust," he said slowly. "Oh, wonderful." Her tone didn't change by a single note. "Then you can tell Mr. Holt that my husband and I would like to schedule a meeting at his earliest convenience. We have some questions about the account terms." She tilted her head slightly. "Specifically about the interest calculations since January of last year." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Wyatt had heard in months. Dale Pritchard looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Wyatt. Wyatt met his eyes and said nothing, because there was nothing he needed to add. "I'll pass that along," Dale said finally. "Much appreciated." Izzy smiled again. "Safe ride back, Mr. Pritchard." Dale turned his horse and rode out of the yard. Wyatt watched him go. When the sound of hoofbeats faded, he turned and looked at Izzy. "We married this morning," he said. "He was going to go back to Holt and report that you're vulnerable and alone," she said, without apology. "Now he's going back to report that you have someone who knows about the account terms. That changes the conversation before we even walk in the door. And when Holt finds out we ain't actually... By the time he thinks to question it, we'll have been in his office." She met his eyes. "Does it bother you?" Wyatt looked at her for a long moment. He thought about a dozen things he could say. He thought about what it had felt like to hear her say his name out loud in front of Dale Pritchard, with that calm, deliberate certainty, like she was planting a flag. "No," he said. "It don't bother me." Something moved in her face. Quick, gone before he could name it. "Good," she said. "I need another 3 hours with the ledger." She went back inside. Wyatt stood in the yard and realized his hands had stopped shaking for the first time in a week. Earl Briggs showed up that afternoon the way Earl always showed up. At the wrong moment, with good intentions and imperfect timing. He came in through the gate with a basket from his wife, and an expression of a man carrying twice as much news as he could comfortably hold. "People are talking," he said, before he'd fully dismounted. "I know," said Wyatt. "No, Wyatt, I mean really talking." Earl dropped his voice as they walked toward the porch. Dale Pritchard went straight from here to Holt's office. I saw him myself. He was in there for 20 minutes. Earl paused. And then Holt went over to talk to Judge Carey. Wyatt stopped walking. What? I don't know what was said, but Gerald Holt doesn't visit the judge for social reasons. Earl set the basket down on the porch rail. And then, this is the part I didn't know what to make of. Holt came out of the courthouse, and he was smiling. The weight of that sat heavy. Gerald Holt, smiling after a visit to the judge, was not a thing that boded well. Wyatt, Earl lowered his voice further. Is she, the woman from the stage, does she know what she's walked into? She knows more about it than I did, Wyatt said honestly. Earl looked at him sideways. What does that mean? It means don't worry about her, Earl. I'm not worried about her. I'm worried about you. And about what Holt's going to do when... The screen door opened, and Izzy leaned out. She looked at Earl without particular surprise. You must be Earl Briggs, she said. Wyatt mentioned you. Earl blinked, touched his hat. Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Come in, she said. I have some questions about the other landowners on this road, and I think you're someone who might know the answers. Earl looked at Wyatt. Wyatt gestured toward the door. Earl went in. 20 minutes later, Wyatt understood why Izzy had wanted Earl in that kitchen. She sat across from Earl with the same calm attention she turned on everything, and she asked him questions that didn't sound like much individually, but landed together like a map being unfolded. Who owned what? Who had sold to whom in the last 3 years? Which parcels had gone to buyers that nobody in town could quite account for? Which families had taken loans from Ridgeline Savings and Trust and found themselves, 1 or 2 years later, quietly gone? Earl answered every question. He'd lived in this valley his whole life, and he knew where every fence post had been moved. And as he talked, Wyatt watched the picture assemble itself in Izzy's expression, piece by piece. When Earl finally ran out of answers, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, How many families have sold to Holt's buyers in the last 4 years? Earl thought about it. 7, he said. Maybe 8. And before that? Before Holt became the primary lender in this valley? Earl shook his head. Holt took over the trust about 5 years back, bought out the previous owner. Izzy looked at Wyatt. Something in that look was different from anything she'd shown him yet. Not alarm, not quite, but something sharper. A recognition. It's not just about your ranch, she said quietly. What do you mean? I mean, this has been going on longer than you, longer than your debt. She tapped the pencil on the table twice. Her tell, Wyatt was already learning. The double tap meant she'd confirmed something she'd suspected. 7 families, Wyatt. 7 parcels that all, I would guess, share something your ranch shares. He looked at her. The Valley Road. The Valley Road, she said. Or what runs under it, or beside it, or through it. Something worth owning, something worth acquiring quietly, piece by piece, through a bank that charges the wrong kind of interest to the right kind of people. Earl had gone very still. You think Holt's been doing this on purpose? I think Gerald Holt visiting a judge the same day his man visits this ranch is not a coincidence, she said. And I think we need to know what was in that conversation before we walk into his bank. She looked at Earl. Is there anyone in this town who might know what Holt said to Judge Carey today? Earl opened his mouth, closed it. Then, carefully. Carey's clerk is a woman named Ruth Dillard. She's been in that courthouse for 15 years. She and my wife... Can your wife speak to her today? Izzy asked. Yes, I reckon she could. Then please ask her to. Izzy stood up and held out her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Briggs. You've been more helpful than you know." Earl shook her hand with the expression of a man who had come to deliver gossip and left having been put to work, and was not entirely unhappy about it. After he was gone, the kitchen was quiet again. Wyatt stood by the stove and watched Izzy look back down at the papers, and he thought about 7 families. 7 families who'd borrowed money from Gerald Holt and ended up gone. 7 parcels quietly absorbed. "Why do I feel like my trouble just got bigger?" he said. She looked up at him. "Because it did," she said. "But bigger trouble means more people who need it solved. And more people who need it solved means you're not fighting this alone." He looked at her across the table, at the papers spread between them, at his father's original loan document with its careful signature, at the pencil marks in Izzy's hand correcting 2 years of deliberate miscalculation. "You came here to help me save a ranch," he said. "Now you're talking about something that sounds a great deal more like a legal fight against the most powerful man in this county." She held his gaze without blinking. "Does that change anything for you?" Wyatt thought about his father walking the fence line at first light, about 7 families gone quiet, about Gerald Holt smiling on the courthouse steps. "No," he said. "It don't change anything." She nodded, once, like that was exactly what she expected him to say. She picked the pencil back up, and in the stillness of that kitchen, with evening coming on and the papers between them and the weight of something larger than either of them had fully named, yet pressing at the walls, Wyatt Carter looked at the woman, who had arrived with one carpetbag and steady eyes, and understood, in a way he couldn't have explained and didn't try to, that everything from here was going to depend on what they built together. He pulled his chair around to her side of the table. "Show me what you see," he said. She slid the ledger toward him, and they bent over it together as the last of the daylight held. Ruth Dillard's message came back before breakfast the next morning, delivered by Earl's wife in a sealed envelope that Earl himself brought to the door with the expression of a man who'd been up since before sunrise and wasn't entirely sure how that had happened. Wyatt opened the door, and Earl thrust the envelope forward without preamble. "Martha sat with Ruth for 2 hours last night," Earl said. "She wouldn't write down what Ruth told her. Said she didn't want it written anywhere. So Martha memorized it." He paused. "Martha's got a better memory than I do. She remembered everything." Wyatt took the envelope, looked at it. "What's in here, then?" "Ruth's handwriting, just names and numbers. Martha said you'd know what they meant once you had the rest." Earl pulled his coat tighter. "Wyatt, Martha was shaken. That woman doesn't shake easy." Izzy appeared at Wyatt's shoulder. She took the envelope from his hands, opened it, read what was inside, and went completely still. "What is it?" Wyatt asked. She looked up at Earl. "Did Martha say what Holt and Judge Carey discussed specifically?" "A property consolidation order," Earl said quietly. "That's what Ruth told her. Some kind of legal instrument that would allow a creditor to petition the court to consolidate multiple delinquent properties under a single receivership." He swallowed. "Meaning, if Holt files that petition, he doesn't just get your ranch, Wyatt. He gets every parcel on this road with an outstanding note at his bank. All at once, under one order." The silence that followed was total. Wyatt took the paper from Izzy's hand and read it. Numbers. Parcel numbers. 7 of them, plus the rocking K. 8 properties. 8 families worth of land, potentially absorbed in a single court filing. "When can he file?" Wyatt's voice was flat. "Ruth didn't know the exact date," Earl said, "but Martha said Ruth used the word imminent." Wyatt handed the paper back to Izzy. He looked at Earl. "Does anyone else know about this?" "Not yet." "Then don't talk about it. Not until we're ready." He looked at Izzy.
She was already reading the numbers again, the pencil moving in her hand even though she wasn't touching paper. Calculating in the air, in her head, the way she did. "We need to go to Holt today," he said. "I know," she said. "Not because we're ready," he said. "Because we're out of time." She met his eyes. "I know that too." She folded the paper and put it in her pocket. "Give me 1 hour." She used that hour at the kitchen table, working with a focus that Wyatt had no equivalent for. He saddled the horses and checked them twice, and then stood on the porch because he couldn't be inside watching and not being able to help. Earl waited by the fence, turning his hat in his hands. "She always like this?" Earl asked. "I've known her 3 days," Wyatt said. "Right." Earl turned the hat again. "She seems like she's known you longer." Wyatt didn't answer that, because he'd had the same thought twice already, and it unsettled him in a way he hadn't decided how to handle. Izzy came out at the end of the hour with a leather satchel, his father's old satchel, pulled from the shelf in the office, and a face that told him nothing except that she was ready. She handed him his hat from the hook by the door, which was not a thing he'd asked her to do, but which meant she'd noticed he always forgot it when he was distracted. He took it without comment. "Earl," she said, "we need you to do something while we're in town." Earl straightened. "Name it." "The other families on this road with notes at Holt's Bank. I need someone to speak with each of them today. Not about the details. Just tell them there may be something worth their attention at the bank and they should not sign anything, accept any offers, or agree to any meetings until they've spoken to Wyatt." She paused. "Can you do that without making it sound like the sky is falling?" "I can try," Earl said. "That's all I'm asking." She turned to Wyatt. "Let's go." Ridgeline's Main Street felt different, in the way a room feels different when everyone in it has already heard the news before you walk in. Wyatt noticed it from the moment they rode in. The looks, the pauses in conversation, the woman outside the dry goods who turned and went inside when she saw them coming. He kept his eyes forward. Izzy rode beside him with perfect composure, like she was arriving somewhere she'd been before and already knew the layout. They tied the horses in front of the trust. A man Wyatt didn't recognize was standing near the door. Young, straight-backed, not a local. He didn't move when they approached, didn't speak, just looked. "That's new," Wyatt said quietly. "Yes," Izzy said just as quietly. "Holt hired him." "How do you know that?" "Because he's looking at us the way someone looks at people he's been told to watch for." She went up the steps first. The man moved aside. She pushed through the door. Gerald Holt was behind his desk. Dale Pritchard was in the chair to the left, and seated against the wall to the right, which was not a thing that happened in an ordinary meeting about a loan, was a man in a dark coat with a leather portfolio on his knee, who had the specific, self-contained quality of someone paid to be present without being officially present. Izzy took all of this in without breaking stride. She sat down in the chair across from Holt and set the satchel on her lap. Wyatt stood beside her. Gerald Holt looked at her with the expression of a man recalibrating a situation he thought he already understood. "Mrs. Carter, was it?" "It was," she said. "I understand you have questions about the account." "I have corrections," she said. She opened the satchel and set 3 documents on the desk. The original loan agreement, the corrected ledger, and a handwritten summary in her own precise numbers. "Your office has been calculating compound interest on a note that was written as simple interest." "I have the original document here, with the terms clearly specified, and a corrected balance that reflects 22 months of overcharge." She set her hand flat on top of the papers. "The actual amount my husband owes is $412 less than what you've been claiming."
Not a sound in the room. Dale Pritchard shifted in his chair. The man in the dark coat did not move. Holt looked at the papers. He didn't touch them. He looked at Wyatt instead. "Your wife has been busy." "She has," Wyatt said. "These are serious accusations." "These are numbers," Izzy said. "Accusations have intent. I'm showing you arithmetic." She pushed the corrected ledger forward. "You can verify it yourself, or you can have your accountant verify it. But the original document is clear. Would you like to read it?" Holt sat back. He didn't pick up the papers. He laced his fingers together on the desk in a way that was designed to look relaxed, and wasn't. "Even granting your analysis," he said carefully, "the remaining balance is still beyond your husband's current ability to pay." "It is," she agreed, "which is why we're requesting a 6-month restructured payment plan under the corrected terms, with the overcharged amount applied to the principal." She reached back into the satchel. "I've prepared a proposal. Projected income from the orchard, current cattle count, expected yield from the east pasture at full stock. All current numbers." She set the proposal on top of the other papers. Holt looked at it, and in the 2 seconds of silence that followed, the man in the dark coat crossed his legs. It was a small movement, almost nothing. But Izzy caught it, and Wyatt, who was watching Izzy, caught it in her. "Who is this gentleman?" Izzy asked. She looked directly at the man against the wall. Holt didn't miss a beat. "An associate." "An associate involved in ranch loan matters?" "A general associate." Izzy looked at him for exactly 1 more second. Then she looked back at Holt. "Mr. Holt, I want to be plain with you. We came here today in good faith with documentation of an error in your calculations and a reasonable proposal for resolution." Her voice didn't change in pitch or speed, but something in it sharpened. "We would prefer to resolve this at this desk, between the 4 of us. But if that's not possible, we are prepared to take the documentation to a state lending examiner and request a formal audit of the trust's practices." She paused. "Not just our account." The shift in the room was physical. Dale Pritchard's jaw tightened. The dark-coated man's hand stilled on his portfolio. Holt said, "That would be a significant step." "It would," she said. "I hope it's unnecessary." Another silence. Longer this time. Holt looked at Wyatt. Wyatt looked back at him without blinking, without speaking, because there was nothing he needed to say. "Leave the proposal," Holt said finally. "I'll review it." "Of course." Izzy stood, folded her hands in front of her, and smiled with her mouth and not her eyes. "We'll expect your response by Friday. Is that agreeable?" Holt said, "Friday." "Thank you for your time." She picked up a satchel. "Good morning, Mr. Holt." She walked to the door. Wyatt followed. As he reached the threshold, he heard Holt's voice behind him. Very quiet and very even. "Carter." Wyatt stopped, turned halfway. "Your father was a stubborn man," Holt said. "Yes, sir," Wyatt said. "He was." He went out into the light. They didn't speak until they were clear of Main Street, horses moving at a steady walk north toward the ranch road. Then Wyatt said, "The man in the dark coat." "I know," Izzy said. "Who is he?" "I don't know yet." She was looking straight ahead. But Holt didn't introduce him, and didn't dismiss him, and didn't ask him to leave, which means he wanted him there, which means that man has an interest in how this meeting went. "A buyer," Wyatt said. "Someone who's already expecting the land." That's what it felt like. He let that sit for a moment. "You mentioned a state lending examiner. Can we actually—" "Yes," she said. The Colorado State Banking Commission has an examination office in Denver. If a formal complaint is filed with the correct documentation, they are required by statute to investigate. She glanced at him. I looked it up before I came west. He stared at her. You looked it up before you came west? I looked up a lot of things before I came west. Her voice was measured, but something underneath it wasn't. Something underneath it was moving fast. I wanted to know what I was walking into. And what exactly were you walking into? She was quiet for a moment. The road stretched ahead of them, the high summer pressing down warm and dry, the sound of their horses easy and steady. Before my father died, she said, we had a house in Cincinnati, a small accounting firm. Enough. She didn't look at him when she talked. She looked at the road. After he died, his business partner claimed my father had taken money that wasn't his, had documents to prove it. Her voice stayed level. The documents were false. I knew they were false because I had kept the actual books for 6 years, and I knew every number in them. She paused. But I was a woman, and he was a man, and the court believed him. Wyatt said nothing. He just listened. We lost the house, she said. Lost the firm. My reputation in Cincinnati was finished. Because once a court rules against your family, it doesn't matter what the truth is. It matters what's on the paper. She turned and looked at him then, direct and unguarded in a way she hadn't been before. So when I saw your advertisement, a man with a struggling ranch and legitimate debt trying not to lose what his father built, I thought, I know how to fight this. I know exactly how to fight this. The words landed somewhere deep. Wyatt looked at her, at the steadiness in her face and the thing underneath it. Not fear, not grief, but something older and quieter than either. The particular stillness of a person who has been through fire and come out the other side not unscathed, but undefeated. That man's partner, Wyatt said carefully. Is he the reason you left Cincinnati? He's the reason Cincinnati left me, she said. He turned back to the road. His hands on the reins were still. Izzy, he said, what you did in that office today. Don't, she said, almost gently. I'm not going to thank you, he said. I'm going to tell you something. He kept his eyes forward. I've been fighting this alone for 2 years. Going to that bank, watching Holt sit back in his chair with that smile, walking out with nothing every time. I started to believe he was right. Started to believe it was already decided. He paused. Today, it didn't feel decided. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quieter. It isn't decided. Not even close. No, he agreed. They rode in silence for a stretch, a comfortable silence, the kind that had taken them, Wyatt realized, only 3 days to earn, which was not a thing he could have explained to anyone, including himself. Then Izzy said, Holt is going to move faster now. I know. The consolidation petition. If he files before Friday, he might. Then we need the other families ready before he does. She straightened in the saddle. And we need to know who that man in the dark coat is before we do anything else. Wyatt thought about the way the man had sat against the wall with his portfolio and his careful stillness, watching the room the way a chess player watches the board. Patient. Already a move ahead. I might know someone who can find out, Wyatt said. Who? Woman named Clara Hess. She runs the rooming house on Birch Street. Been in this town longer than the bank has. Knows everyone who passes through. He glanced at Izzy. And she doesn't like Gerald Holt. Why not? Her husband had land on this road, Wyatt said. He died 6 years ago. The land went to Holt the same year. His voice was even, but something behind it wasn't. She's never talked about it directly, but 7 families, Izzy. 7. And Clara Hess makes 8. He watched her process that. Watched the pencil tap movement of her fingers against the saddle. Once, twice, confirming. "Go see her," she said. "Today. Alone. She'll speak more freely without a stranger." "And you?" "I'll be at the ranch." She paused. "Earl should be getting back with news about the other families. I want to hear what they said." Wyatt nodded. He turned his horse at the crossroads, her continuing north, him swinging east toward town. "Wyatt." Her voice stopped him. He looked back. "Holt knows we're not bluffing now," she said. "That changes what he'll do. He's not going to offer us an easy agreement." She held his gaze. "Whatever he does next, it won't be clean." Wyatt settled his hat lower against the sun. "No," he said. "I don't reckon it will." He rode east. Behind him, Izzy rode north, and the summer heat pressed down on the valley road like a hand. And somewhere, in a dark-coated man's leather portfolio, something was already being written that neither of them had read yet. Clara Hess opened her door before Wyatt could knock. That was the thing about Clara. She always knew someone was coming before they arrived, which was either a gift or the result of 30 years watching a rooming house door from the same window chair. She was a small woman, iron-haired, with hands that had done hard work long enough that they'd stopped apologizing for it. She looked at Wyatt, and then looked past him, at the empty road behind him, and something in her face settled into a kind of tired recognition. "Come in," she said. "I've been expecting someone." He followed her into the front room. She didn't offer coffee, which told him she already knew this wasn't a social call. She sat in her window chair and folded her hands and looked at him with eyes that had seen enough of this valley to fill 3 lifetimes. "You went to the bank this morning," she said. "Word still travels fast." "Dale Pritchard has a loud horse." She studied him. "How did it go?" "Well enough that Holt's going to move faster now," Wyatt said. He sat down across from her. "Clara, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer me the same way." "I generally do." "The man in Holt's office, dark coat, leather portfolio, not local. I'd have recognized him. Who is he?" Clara was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone who didn't know. The quiet of someone deciding how much of what they knew to put into words. "His name is Preston Alt," she said. "He came through here 8 days ago. Stayed 2 nights. She looked at her hands. "He works for a land development company out of Denver. They've been acquiring valley properties in 3 counties. Quietly. Through banks, mostly." She paused. "Through banks that find reasons to foreclose." The room went very still. "How do you know this?" Wyatt asked. "Because he left a document in his room," she said. "He didn't mean to. It was folded inside a newspaper he left on the nightstand." She looked up at Wyatt. "I read it before I decided whether to burn it." "What was in it?" "A property list," she said. "Parcel numbers. This valley, the next valley east, and 2 more south of the ridge." She held his gaze. "Your ranch was on it, Wyatt. Your father's ranch was on that list with a projected acquisition date of this October." He didn't move, didn't speak for a moment. Then, quietly, "October." "They've been planning this for at least a year," Clara said. "Possibly 2. He stood up, sat back down, stood up again, walked to the far wall, and turned back. Clara watched him without flinching. "Do you still have the document?" he asked. "I kept it," she said. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I kept it." She opened the small wooden box on the table beside her chair and held out a folded paper. Wyatt took it, read it. The paper was typed on official letterhead, Colorado Valley Land Associates, Denver office. The parcel numbers were precise and correct. His father's land was listed as Parcel 7. Status, pending acquisition. Projected date, October 1884. His hands were not shaking. He noticed that. 2 weeks ago, this would have broken something in him. Right now, it just made everything very clear. "Clara," he said, "my wife needs to see this." Something crossed Clara's face at the word. Not surprise exactly. More like a careful, private hope. "I heard you'd sent for someone," she said. "She came 3 days ago," he said. "She found the interest miscalculation in one evening. She faced down Holt this morning without blinking once." He looked at Clara directly. "She came from Cincinnati, lost everything to a man who falsified accounting records and had enough standing to make the court believe him." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "Bring her to me," she said. "Tonight." Earl was on the porch of the rocking K when Wyatt rode in, which was not the arrangement they'd discussed. And the look on Earl's face was the look of a man carrying something heavy and moving badly under the weight of it. Wyatt was off his horse before it stopped. "What happened?" "3 of the families on the road got papers today," Earl said. "Formal notice from the trust, demanding full payment of outstanding balances within 30 days or facing legal action." He swallowed. "Wyatt, 30 days isn't enough time for any of them to raise that kind of money." "That's the point," Wyatt said. "It gets worse." Earl dropped his voice, even though there was no one else in the yard. "Judge Carey signed something this afternoon. I don't know the specifics, but Ruth sent word to Martha again. The consolidation petition. Holt didn't just have it prepared. Carey already stamped it. It's sitting on Holt's desk ready to file." "Ready to file when?" "Ruth said the moment he has 30-day default notices outstanding from at least 5 properties." Earl looked at him. "He already sent 3 today. He needs 2 more." Wyatt did the arithmetic without wanting to. 3 notices today, 2 more needed, and the rocking K was the obvious next target. 1 signature from Holt and a courier, and it was done. "Where's Izzy?" he said. "Inside. Wyatt, she's been writing for 2 hours straight. I don't know what she's writing, but she keeps asking me questions and sending me to look things up in your father's files. And she's got that look." "What look?" "The look," Earl said helplessly, "of someone who has figured something out and is now building the cage." Wyatt went inside. She was at the table. The papers had multiplied since morning. The original documents, the corrected ledger, 3 different pages of figures in her handwriting, and what appeared to be a formal letter in progress with careful, deliberate penmanship. She looked up when he walked in, read his face immediately. "What did Clara tell you?" she asked. He set the document from Clara's box on the table in front of her. She picked it up, read it. He watched her face go through 3 different things in quick succession. Confirmation, calculation, and then something cold and focused that wasn't quite anger, but was directly adjacent to it. "Colorado Valley Land Associates," she said. "You know it?" "I've heard of the structure." She set the paper down with great care. "It's not uncommon in land speculation. A holding company acquires a bank, or places a cooperative officer inside one, and then uses the bank's lending authority to engineer defaults on properties they want to acquire. By the time the land consolidates under the holding company, there's no direct line between the acquisitions and the original conspiracy." She looked up at him. "It's difficult to prove," Unless you have the planning document. She touched the paper from Clara. That's a planning document, she said. Clara's willing to testify to where she found it and when, Wyatt said. Something moved in Izzy's face, fierce and quick, gone almost before he caught it. She turned back to the letter she'd been writing. "Sit down," she said. "I need to tell you what I've been doing." He sat. "I've been writing a complaint," she said. "A formal complaint to the Colorado State Banking Commission, with attached documentation of the interest miscalculation, the pattern of foreclosures, and a request for emergency examination of the trust's practices." She organized the pages as she spoke. A standard complaint takes weeks to process, but there is a provision in the state banking statutes for an emergency injunction, a temporary halt on bank actions against a specific debtor, if the complainant can demonstrate active fraud and imminent harm. And this document, Wyatt touched the paper from Clara. "This document is evidence of a coordinated scheme," she said. "That's not a calculation error. That's conspiracy." She looked at him. "If we file the complaint in Denver with this attached and request the emergency injunction, Holt cannot legally proceed with a consolidation petition while the complaint is under review." Wyatt stared at her. "How long would the review take?" "Months, potentially. Long enough for us to stabilize the ranch income. Long enough for the other families to get their finances in order. Long enough for a proper investigation." She paused. "But we have to file before Holt sends those last 2 default notices. Once he has 5 properties in default and files the consolidation, it becomes a court matter, and that's harder to stop. How much time do we have?" "If he follows the pattern he used with the 3 notices today, he'll send the next 2 tomorrow morning." She looked at him steadily. "We need to get this to Denver today. Denver is 6 hours by hard ride." "I know." She was already folding the complaint, carefully and precisely. "Who is the fastest rider you trust?" He thought for less than 2 seconds. "Ben Archer. He's 22, got the best horse on this road, and he doesn't like banks." "Get him," she said. "Now." Ben Archer was there in 40 minutes, because Earl had already gone for him without being asked. Which was the thing about Earl that made up for all his talking. Ben was young, lean, with the look of someone permanently mid-motion. He looked at the sealed envelope Izzy handed him, then at Wyatt. "Denver," Wyatt said. "Tonight?" "Before sunrise tomorrow at the latest. You ride to the State Banking Commission office on Larimer Street. You put this in the hands of the duty examiner personally, not a clerk, not a secretary, the examiner on duty. You say it's an emergency filing under Section 14 of the State Banking Code." He looked at Ben hard. "Can you do that?" "Already done," Ben said, and he was out the door. The hoofbeats faded fast. In the kitchen, the silence that followed was the specific silence of people who have just committed to something they cannot take back. Earl looked at Wyatt. Wyatt looked at Izzy. Izzy looked at the table. "He's going to find out," she said. "Possibly tonight, possibly tomorrow morning. But Holt will learn that we've filed." She picked up her pencil, set it down, picked it up again. "When he does, he is going to try to discredit this filing before the examiner acts on it." "How?" Earl asked. "By discrediting us." She said it plainly, without drama, which made it worse. "Our account, our character. Anything he can put in front of the commission that makes us look like difficult debtors making false claims to delay legitimate collection." "And the document from Clara," Wyatt said, "is our strongest piece of evidence and also our most vulnerable one. A document found in a rooming house room by the proprietor. Holt's lawyer will argue provenance. Will argue it was planted or misinterpreted or taken without context." She looked up. "Which is why I need to go to Denver myself."
The word landed in the room and stayed there. "No," Wyatt said. "Listen. I said no." His voice was harder than he'd intended. He pulled it back. "Izzy, if you're in Denver and Holt moves tomorrow, if I'm not in Denver to present this evidence personally, it's a packet of papers delivered by a stranger." She stood up. "I know how these proceedings work. I have sat in offices like that banking commission and watched claims dissolve because there was no one in the room who understood the numbers well enough to defend them in the moment." Her voice didn't rise, but the weight in it did. "I need to be there." "Then I go with you," he said. "Someone needs to be here. The other families need—" "Earl can—" "Wyatt." She stepped around the table. She stood in front of him and looked up at him with a direct, unguarded expression that had been appearing more frequently and still hit him somewhere unguarded every time. "I have done this before. Not this exactly, but rooms like it, men like them, documents like these. This is what I know how to do." A pause. "Let me do it." He looked at her for a long moment. He thought about Cincinnati, about a courtroom where the numbers had been on her side and the room hadn't been. He thought about what it had cost her and what it had not taken from her. "Clara," he said, "you said you wanted to see Clara tonight." "I do. She needs to be ready to make a formal statement. She's the chain of custody for that document." "Then we go to Clara tonight," he said. "Both of us. And tomorrow we ride together." She started to say something. He shook his head once. "Together," he said. "Or I go to Holt's office tonight and make enough trouble that none of this matters." Something in her face shifted. Not capitulation. She didn't capitulate, he was learning. But something quieter. A recognition. "Together," she said. Earl, who had been standing very still against the wall through all of this, let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for 3 minutes. Clara was ready for them. She had the document in her hands and a second paper beside it, her own written account, dated and signed, of finding the document, reading it, and preserving it. Wyatt had never seen Clara Hess look nervous. She looked nervous now, in the specific way of someone doing something that matters, knowing the cost. "They'll come after you for this," Izzy told her directly. "I know," Clara said. "Holt will claim you trespassed in a guest's private property. He'll bring Alt in to deny the document is his. It could get unpleasant." Clara looked at her steadily. "My husband's land is on that list too," she said. "Parcel 12. He died thinking he'd lost everything because he couldn't manage his finances." Her voice was steady and very quiet. "He was a careful man, a good man. He didn't lose it because he couldn't manage. He lost it because someone made sure he couldn't pay." She set her written account on top of the original document and slid toward Izzy. "I've been waiting 6 years for someone to walk in that door who could do something useful with this." Izzy took the papers. She held Clara's gaze for a moment. "I will not waste this," she said. Clara looked at her, really looked at her, in the searching way of an older woman measuring a younger one, and then nodded once, with the decisive finality of someone who has made a decision and intends to live with it. "I know you won't," she said. On the ride home, the summer dark pressed close and warm, stars coming out one by one overhead, the horses moving at an easy walk. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Izzy said, "She's braver than she looks." "Most people in this valley are," Wyatt said. "They just needed a reason to act." "We gave them one today," she said. "You gave them one," he said. 3 days ago, you didn't know any of their names." She was quiet for a moment. "You gave me a reason to come here,"
she said. That's where it started. He looked at her in the dark. She was looking straight ahead, but something in the line of her shoulders was different from the composed, contained woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach 4 days ago. Something in her was less held in. Not open. She might never be truly open, he was coming to understand. Her caution was too well earned for that. But present. Genuinely present. Izzy, he said. What you said before, about coming because you could fight this. He kept his voice even. Was that the only reason? She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was measured and honest in equal parts. I wanted to start over somewhere no one had already decided who I was. And? A pause. And your letter mentioned your father built the ranch from nothing. That the land meant something. She glanced at him sideways. I wanted to be somewhere that something meant something. Wyatt looked at the road ahead. His father's lands spread out on either side in the dark. The orchard somewhere to the left. The east pasture somewhere to the right. 12 acres of apple trees setting fruit nobody had gotten around to losing yet. It means something, he said. It still does. She said nothing, but she rode a little closer than she had before, and he didn't move away. And they came back to the ranch in the warm dark, with Denver ahead of them, and Gerald Holt's next move somewhere in the hours between now and morning, and neither of them had any way of knowing what they were riding toward. What they knew, what sat between them steady and unspoken and too new to name, was that they were riding toward it together. And for right now, in the particular dark of a Colorado summer night, that was enough. They left before sunrise. Wyatt had the horses ready at 4 a.m, saddlebags packed with the documents. The original loan agreement, the corrected ledger, Izzy's formal complaint, Clara's written statement, and Preston Alt's planning document in its own sealed envelope. Izzy came out of the house with her hair pinned back and her traveling coat on and the leather satchel over her shoulder, and she looked at the dark sky and the 2 horses and said nothing. Just mounted with the efficient ease of someone who had stopped wasting time on things that didn't matter. Earl was there, because Earl was always there. I'll watch the road, he said. If Holt sends notices to any more families today, I'll know within the hour. Don't confront anyone, Wyatt told him. I know. Don't send word to Martha that goes anywhere near Ruth Dillard for the next 2 days. If Holt suspects Ruth talked, I know, Wyatt. Earl gripped his arm once, briefly. Go. They rode out of the yard at a hard trot and hit the Denver road as the first gray light started pulling the dark apart at the edges. They didn't talk much in the first hour. The road demanded attention in the dark. Loose rock, ruts, a creek crossing that ran faster than usual from the summer rains 2 days back. Wyatt watched Izzy handle her horse and noted, not for the first time, that she rode like someone who had learned on necessity rather than pleasure. Competent, economical, no wasted movement. When the light came up fully and the road smoothed out, she said, "Tell me about the banking commission." "I've never been there," he said. "Then tell me what you know about it." "State office. Been operational about 4 years. 3 examiners on staff, a chief and 2 deputies. They handle complaints about state-chartered banks." He paused. "Holt's Trust is state-chartered." "Which means they have full jurisdiction," she said. She was thinking aloud. He knew that now. The way she talked through things wasn't asking for reassurance. It was building the argument in real time. "The emergency injunction provision. Have you heard of it being used before?" "Once," he said. "About 3 years back. A bank in Pueblo was trying to foreclose on a mining operation while a fraud complaint was pending. The examiner issued a temporary halt." He glanced at her. It held up. Good. She adjusted the satchel on her shoulder. Then there's precedent. That matters. Izzy, he kept his eyes on the road. What if the examiner on duty today is someone Holt already has access to? She was quiet for a beat. That's possible, she said. Holt has had time to build relationships in Denver. A man planning something this scale would make sure he had cover at multiple levels. She paused. If the duty examiner refuses the filing or stalls it, we request to see the chief examiner directly. We don't leave without seeing someone with the authority to act. And if they won't see us? Then we go to the state attorney general's office, she said. It's 3 blocks from the banking commission. Same building, different floor. She said it the way someone says it, who has already looked up the floor plan. We don't run out of doors today, Wyatt. We just keep opening them until one leads somewhere. He looked at her. In the full morning light, with the road ahead of them and Denver still 4 hours out, she looked exactly like what she was. A woman who had been knocked completely flat by the worst that a rigged system could do, and had gotten back up and memorized the rulebook. He thought about the night his father died, about sitting in the ranch house alone with the deed on the table and a debt he didn't know how to climb out from under, and the particular despair of a man who can see the cliff edge, but not the way back from it. He thought about the letter he'd written in desperation to an agency in St. Louis. He thought about what it meant that she had answered it. We're going to win this, he said. Not a question, not quite reassurance. Something more like a decision. She turned and looked at him, and for the first time since she'd stepped off that stagecoach, she smiled. A real one, not the controlled, strategic smile she used in rooms with men like Holt, but something genuine and a little unguarded, and over almost before it arrived. Yes, she said. We are. They were 2 hours outside of Denver when the rider caught up with them. Wyatt heard the hoofbeats before he saw the horse. Fast, urgent, closing the distance between them with a kind of speed that meant bad news rather than good. He put his hand out to slow Izzy and turned in the saddle. Ben Archer came over the rise at a dead gallop. He pulled up hard beside them, his horse lathered, his face stripped of everything except the news he was carrying. He filed, Ben said. Holt filed the consolidation petition this morning, an hour after you left. Izzy's hand tightened on the reins. How many properties? 5, Ben said. He sent 2 more notices out last night after dark. The Harmon place and the Widow Gaines. He was breathing hard from the ride. Carrie signed the consolidation order at 7 this morning. I saw Dale Pritchard riding toward the Harmon place when I left. The silence between the 3 of them had weight to it. Wyatt's jaw was tight. So it's already a court order. A signed order, Ben said. Not yet executed. Dale's delivering the notices, but the actual seizure process takes time. 10 days at minimum under state law before physical possession can be transferred. 10 days, Izzy said. She was doing the calculation behind her eyes. He could see it. That's enough. She looked at Wyatt. A court order can be suspended if a superior authority finds cause. If the Banking Commission issues an emergency injunction and the State Attorney General's office opens a fraud investigation, a county court order does not supersede that. Does not supersede, Wyatt repeated. You're certain? State authority outranks county authority, she said. And fraud investigation supersedes civil collection proceedings. That's not a technicality. That's the structure of the law. She straightened in the saddle. We ride harder. Ben looked at Wyatt. I filed the complaint last night. The duty examiner took the envelope. He read the first page and told me to tell you to come in person. That's something, Izzy said immediately. He also said, Ben continued, carefully, that Gerald Holt had already been in contact with the Commission's Denver office this morning. Another silence. Shorter this time, because there wasn't room for long silences anymore. "How early?" Izzy asked. "Before the office opened," Ben said. "Someone at the commission told the woman at the front desk, who told the man at the coffee cart outside, who was still there when I arrived." He paused. Holt's lawyer was waiting on the steps when the commission opened. Wyatt looked at Izzy. "He knew we were coming." "He knew we were coming the moment we walked out of his office yesterday," she said. "He's been preparing since then." She reached into the satchel and pulled out the sealed envelope containing Alt's planning document. She held it up. "This is what he doesn't know we have." His lawyer walked in there this morning, expecting to counter a complaint about interest calculations. "They don't know about Colorado Valley Land Associates. They don't know about the property list." She put the envelope back. "That's our leverage, and we have to walk in there before Holt's lawyer has time to prepare for it." "Then we stop talking," Wyatt said. They rode. The Colorado State Banking Commission occupied the third floor of a stone building on Larimer Street that smelled of paper and cedar and the particular staleness of authority. Wyatt had never been inside it. He took in the front room, clerk at a desk, two men in suits waiting on a bench, a door with frosted glass that said Chief Examiner in black lettering, and stayed close behind Izzy, because this was her territory more than his, and he knew it. She walked to the clerk without hesitation. "Isabelle Carter and Wyatt Carter. We have an emergency filing from last night, and we're here to present supporting documentation in person." The clerk checked a ledger. "Ma'am, there is a representative here from Ridgeline Savings and Trust who—" "Is he in with the examiner now?" A pause. "He's been waiting for the examiner to return from a morning meeting." Izzy looked at the frosted glass door, then at the clerk. "Then the examiner hasn't heard either side yet?" "No, ma'am, not formally." "Then please tell him we're here." She set the satchel on the counter. "And please tell him we have original documentation, including a planning document from Colorado Valley Land Associates that was not included in last night's filing." The clerk looked at the satchel, looked at her, went through the door. Wyatt stood beside Izzy and did not look at the man in the suit on the bench to his left, who had gone very still the moment Izzy said Colorado Valley Land Associates. Holt's lawyer. Had to be. The man recovered quickly. He stood up and straightened his coat and said, with the smooth confidence of someone paid by the hour to sound certain, "Mrs. Carter, I presume. I'm afraid you've made a rather long ride for nothing. The matter of the Rocking K account has already been addressed through proper legal channels." Izzy looked at him. "And you are?" "Richard Farr. I represent Ridgeline Savings and Trust." "Mr. Farr." She was perfectly pleasant. "The consolidation order filed this morning affects 8 properties under a coordinated scheme to benefit a Denver land speculation company. That is not a bank collection matter. That is fraud." She held his gaze without blinking. "The proper legal channels for fraud are different from the ones your client has been using." Farr's pleasant expression didn't change, but his eyes did. "That's a serious allegation." "It's a documented one," she said. The frosted glass door opened. The clerk held it. "The chief examiner will see you now," he said. "Both parties." Chief Examiner Harold Voss was a lean man in his 50s, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and the expression of someone who had spent enough years in this office to be surprised by very little. He looked at Wyatt and Izzy across his desk, then at Farr in the chair beside them, and then back at the filing Ben had delivered the night before. "I've read the initial complaint," he said. "Interest miscalculation, pattern of foreclosures, request for emergency injunction." He set it down. "Mr. Farr contacted this office at 7:45 this morning to advise that this complaint is retaliatory in nature, filed by a delinquent debtor seeking to delay legitimate collection proceedings." "That is our position," Farr said. Voss looked at Wyatt. Mr. Carter? Wyatt looked at Izzy. She nodded once. He reached into the satchel and placed the documents on the desk one at a time. The original loan agreement, the corrected ledger, Clara's signed statement, and last, the Colorado Valley Land Associates planning document, still in its sealed envelope, which he opened now and unfolded flat on the desk in front of Voss. Parcel 7, he said. Rocking K Ranch. Projected acquisition date, October 1884. This document was found in a ridgeline rooming house by the proprietor, who has provided a signed statement attesting to where and when she found it. The proprietor can testify in person. Voss picked up the planning document. He read it. He read it again. His glasses came down off his forehead. Richard Farr had gone very still. This lists 8 properties, Voss said. Yes, sir, Izzy said. All with outstanding notes at Ridgeline Savings and Trust. All with notes that carry interest calculated incorrectly in the bank's favor. All targeted for acquisition through a pattern of engineered defaults. She set her written analysis on top. I've documented the interest pattern across all 8 accounts using public record numbers. The methodology is consistent across every account. This is not error. This is a system. Voss looked at Farr. Farr said, the provenance of that document is attested to by a signed statement from a 30-year resident of Ridgeline, with no financial interest in this matter, Izzy said, whose late husband's property is also on that list. The room was very quiet. Voss set down the planning document. He folded his hands. He looked at Richard Farr with the expression of a man who had just understood what he was looking at. Mr. Farr, he said, I'm going to need your client's account records for all 8 properties listed in this document. I'm requesting them today under the Commission's examination authority. He picked up his pen. I'm also issuing a temporary suspension of all collection and transfer actions associated with these properties pending review. He looked up. That includes the consolidation order filed in Ridgeline this morning. Farr stood up. Mr. Voss, I must object. Your objection is noted, Voss said. It doesn't change the order. He looked at Wyatt and Izzy. I'm opening a formal examination. That takes time. But nothing moves on these properties while it's open. He removed his glasses and set them on the desk. Whoever prepared this documentation did thorough work. My wife, Wyatt said. She prepared it. Voss looked at Izzy with something that was not quite surprise, but was close to it. She met his look without comment. The Commission will be in contact within the week, Voss said. They were outside on Larimer Street when it hit Wyatt fully. Not gradually, not in pieces, but all at once, like a door blown open by wind. He stopped walking, put his hand on the stone wall of the building, and stood there for a moment with his eyes closed. Izzy stopped beside him. She didn't ask if he was all right. She just stood there. After a moment, he straightened up and looked at her. It's not over, she said quietly. The examination takes months. Holt will fight it. I know. The ranch still needs to produce income. The corrected balance is still real debt. I know that too. He looked at her. But it's not decided anymore. That's what's different. His voice was rough in a way he didn't try to smooth over. 2 weeks ago it was decided. Now it's not. She looked at him for a long moment. In the light of a Denver summer morning, with the sound of the city moving around them, and the satchel over her shoulder, and Clara's document safely in the hands of a man with the authority to act on it, she looked like someone who had arrived where she was trying to go. Not triumphant. She wasn't a triumphant person. But settled. Purposeful. Like a river that had found its proper course. Come home, she said.
They rode back through the afternoon heat, and this time they talked. Really talked. The way two people talk when the immediate crisis is past, and there's space for the things they'd been setting aside to finally take up room. He told her about his father, about learning to read a fence line and turn a calf and judge weather by the way the horses moved in the morning, about the particular pride of a man who builds something with his hands, and the particular grief of his son who nearly let it die. She told him about Cincinnati, more than she'd told him before, about her father's office, the smell of it, ink and wood smoke and the dusty paper smell of ledgers, and the way numbers had always been more honest to her than most people, about the morning the court ruled against her family, and the way she'd sat in the hallway afterward, not crying, because she'd known even then that crying wasn't going to fix the numbers. "Did you ever go back?" he asked. "No," she said.
There was nothing to go back to. She was quiet for a moment. "I used to think that was the worst thing, losing the place you knew." She looked at the road ahead. "Now I think it was just the thing that had to happen first." "First before what?" She looked at him. "Before I found somewhere worth staying." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he looked at the road. His jaw was tight in the way it got when he was feeling something he didn't have immediate words for. "Izzy," he said. "Don't make it complicated," she said gently. "I'm not." He looked back at her. "I want you to stay. Not as an arrangement. Not because of the ranch or the debt or any of it." He said it straight, because there was no other way he knew how to say things. "Because you walked off a stagecoach with one bag, and the first night you were here you told me it wasn't over. And you were right. And I don't think I'd have known that without you." She didn't answer immediately. He'd expected that. She was not a woman who answered before she'd thought. He waited. "I already told you I'm staying," she said at last. "You told me you were staying for the fight." "I stayed for the fight," she said. "I'm staying for the rest of it because I want to." She paused. "There's a difference." He nodded slowly. Something in his chest that had been compressed for 2 years, maybe longer, shifted and didn't shift back. They rode the last mile to the rocking quay as the sun dropped toward the ridgeline, and when they came through the gate, Earl was sitting on the porch, and he stood up and looked at their faces and let out a breath that could have been heard from the road. "Well," he said. "Examination opened," Wyatt said. "Consolidation suspended." Earl sat back down on the step and put his face in his hands. "Earl," Izzy said. He looked up. His eyes were wet, which Earl would later deny to anyone who asked. "Tell the families on this road," she said. "Tell them." The kitchen that night was quiet in a way it hadn't been since Izzy arrived. Not the empty quiet of a house with one person in it, but the full quiet of two people who have spent everything they had and earned the right to sit still for a moment. The lamp was on. The papers were still on the table. They'd probably live on that table for months. But Izzy had stacked them neatly, the way she stacked everything, and left the corrected ledger on top with a note in her handwriting that said, "Actual balance." Wyatt looked at that note for a long time. Actual balance. 2 words that had seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. 2 words that now held 12 acres of orchard and 100 head of cattle, and a barn roof that needed fixing on the south side, and a porch post that would take the corner if they didn't deal with it before winter. 2 words that held 8 families still on their land because a woman from Cincinnati had walked into a stagecoach with 1 carpet bag and refused to accept that the numbers couldn't be corrected. He looked across the table at Izzy, who was reading Clara's statement one more time, making sure everything was in order, because that was who she was, a woman who made sure everything was in order, not because someone was watching, but because disorder offended something deep in her that believed the world ought to be honest. She felt him looking, glanced up. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said, just thinking. About what? He leaned back in his chair. About how my father used to say that the land didn't belong to the man who owned the deed. He said it belonged to whoever was willing to fight for it. She set down Clara's statement. He was right, she said. He was. Wyatt looked at the lamp, at the deed on the shelf,
At the woman across the table from him, who had come west to start over and ended up fighting for 8 families she'd never met, with numbers and patience and a kind of moral ferocity that had walked calmly into a bank office and dismantled 2 years of deliberate fraud on a Tuesday morning without raising her voice once.
Izzy, he said. Wyatt, she said. A beat. Thank you, he said. She looked at him for a long moment, and then, quietly and without ceremony, she reached across the table and set her hand over his. Just that. No words. Just her hand, steady and warm, on top of his. Outside, the orchard held its fruit in the dark. The fence line ran straight and true the way his father had set it. The east pasture waited for cattle, and the south barn roof waited for repair. And Gerald Holt's examination was just beginning, and there were months of hard work ahead, and nothing about any of it was certain, except one thing. The Rocking K Ranch was not going to fall.
Not while Wyatt Carter stood on his father's land and Isabelle Montgomery Carter stood beside him. And they had decided, together, that it was not over. It was, in every way that mattered, just beginning.